What Kim Yoo-jung really faced during her puberty struggles. Imagine a child whose laughter lit up the nation's screens for over a decade, only to vanish into the shadows of her own room, whispering, "Who am I?" to the darkness. That's the unspoken price of stardom. Kim Yoo-jung paid long before the world crowned her a leading lady. In a raw, unfiltered conversation that feels like peeking behind the velvet curtain of Korean entertainment, the actress, now in her mid-20s, peels back layers of her past on the Yojung Jae-hyung channel, a space where vulnerability meets humor in the most unexpected ways. Uploaded just days ago on November 16th, 2025, the video titled "The Broadcast of Yoo-jung," whom we all raised together since she was 4, and the story behind it, captures her as a guest alongside host Jung Jae-hyung, a comedian whose own journey from early fame lends an air of shared survival to their exchange. It's a moment that tugs at the heartstrings, reminding us how the nation's little sister, a moniker she earned through countless heartwarming roles, navigated the treacherous waters of adolescence not with rebellion, but with a quiet, aching confusion that many of us only face in the safety of adulthood. As she speaks, her voice carries a gentle wistfulness, like someone finally exhaling after holding their breath for years. And it leaves you pondering the fragility of those who grow up under spotlights that never dim. From the tender age of 4, when she first stepped into the limelight as a model for a popular confectionery brand, Kim Yoo-jung's path was one of precocious promise, a whirlwind of auditions and sets that blurred the lines between playtime and profession. Debuting in acting with a small role in the 2003 film In Search of Lost Time, she quickly became the go-to child star for directors seeking that rare blend of innocence and depth, her wide eyes and dimpled smile capturing hearts in dramas like Queen Sondok and Dong-yi. Yet even in those early days, there was a subtle undercurrent of intensity. She recalls the thrill of being chosen, the way it made her feel seen in a world that often overlooked the small, but also the creeping exhaustion of schedules that stole away lazy afternoons with friends. It's a reflection that hits hard, how something so magical can quietly erode the simple joys of childhood, leaving echoes of loneliness in the quiet moments between takes. Host Jung Jae-hyung nods knowingly, sharing how he too started young, at 20, under the weight of parental expectations that felt like invisible strings pulling every decision. For Yoo-jung, those strings were tied even tighter, her parents guiding her through elementary school gigs until suddenly, around age 12, the reins loosened, thrusting her into a realm of self-determination that no teenager should shoulder alone. There's a poignant irony here, a sense of admiration mixed with sorrow for her resilience, as she describes that shift not as liberation, but as a sudden free fall into uncharted emotional territory. The turning point arrived like a tidal wave in 2012 with The Moon Embracing the Sun, a historical fantasy drama that skyrocketed her to fame, its episodes routinely pulling in viewer ratings between 35 and 42%, numbers that turned her portrayal of the young shaman Hyo-young into a cultural phenomenon. Clad in flowing hanbok, she embodied a character torn between destiny and heartbreak, her performance so nuanced that it set an impossibly high bar for the adult actress who followed. But behind the acclaim lay a storm brewing. It was during these grueling shoots, amid the Joseon-era palaces recreated on vast sets, that puberty crashed into her life with full force. The public adored her as the epitome of cuteness and grace, dubbing her the nation's younger sister, after roles in family-friendly hits like Iljame and Painter of the Wind. Yet that very image chafed against the hormonal upheavals she was experiencing privately. She confesses with a soft laugh, laced with hindsight regret, how irritating it felt. The constant gaze of expectation clashing with her inner turmoil, making every smile on camera feel like a mask slipping further askew. Social media was still in its infancy then, a mercy that shielded her from the instant feedback loops that plague young stars today. But it also isolated her further, her outings rare and scripted, her school days fragmented by commutes between classrooms and filming locations. In that bubble, she didn't even recognize her own emotional fog. Work was simply the anchor, the one constant in a sea of flux. And reflecting on it now, she marvels at the quiet strength it took to keep sailing, even as waves of doubt threatened to capsize her. As the years ticked by, that adolescent haze thickened, stretching from the Moon era into her late teens, a prolonged season of self-doubt where external validation couldn't pierce the veil of internal isolation. Jung Jae-hyung draws a parallel to nature's rhythms, likening it to fledglings leaving the nest, messy, instinctual, and utterly terrifying. And Yojung agrees, her eyes lighting up with recognition at how this phase of identity formation hit her harder because it coincided with her first taste of true agency. Eager for the Moon role, she devoured the synopsis, drawn to its epic romance and mystical elements, unaware it would mark the dawn of her deepest confusions. By 16, the peak of those struggles, she was adrift, in a profound lack of self-understanding, questioning not just her career choices, but the very essence of who she was becoming. It's a vulnerability that evokes a tender ache in the listener. The realization that while fans cheered her lead turns in high-stakes dramas, she was grappling with philosophies most don't encounter until college seminars or quiet midnights. The host's wisdom cuts through like a lifeline. Bury those unresolved knots, he warns, and they resurface in your 40s or 50s as a late bloom crisis, far scarier for its delayed ferocity. Yojung absorbs this with a nod of quiet gratitude, her reflection carrying a subtle resolve. Better to unearth them young, she seems to say, even if it means wandering lost for a spell. One incident stands out in her recounting like a shadow etched in memory. At the height of this inner storm, she barricaded herself in her room for an entire month. Lights off, curled in solitude as existential queries looped endlessly in her mind. "Who am I?" she'd murmur to the empty air, followed by, "What kind of person am I, really?" Questions that sliced deeper because they echoed the very characters she was slipping into on screen. Fresh off the moon embracing the sun, she dove headfirst into roles that demanded emotional excavation, starting with the 2015 film Circle of Atonement, where she played Yeon-woo, a seemingly bubbly girl harboring dark family secrets tied to a cycle of guilt and revenge. Filming alongside veteran Sung Dong-il, whose steady presence offered a paternal anchor amid the intensity, she navigated scenes of fractured innocence that mirrored her own budding fractures. Simultaneously, Angry Mom thrust her into the role of Oh Aran, a high schooler enduring brutal bullying, her on-screen anguish amplified by co-star Kim Hee-sun's fierce maternal energy, in a story blending revenge thriller with heartfelt redemption. These weren't light fare. One character weathered school violence in a web of peer betrayal, while the other inherited a legacy of paternal violence through bloodlines stained with murder. As a fledgling actress, she chased these weighty parts with a hunger for growth, convinced that embodying trauma would sharpen her craft without scarring her soul. Oh, the naivety of youth, she reflects now, with a wry smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. How she brushed off senior actors' cautions about roles that assimilate too deeply, their warnings of blurred boundaries falling on deaf ears, until she felt it herself, the eerie merge of self and shadow that left her unmoored. That immersion wasn't just artistic ambition, it was a double-edged sword, accelerating crises that might have unfolded more gently in a balanced life. At 15 or 16, a decade ahead of the typical timeline Jung Jae-hyung describes for his own generation of early starters, she was sponges for every influence, her porous psyche absorbing the script's darkness like ink on wet paper. Surrounded by the relentless hum of the industry, late-night rehearsals, makeup tests under fluorescent glare, the polite deference of crews that isolated her from peers, her philosophical ponderings amplified into a roar. She jokes about the absurdity of it all, quipping that she was still so young even now, drawing easy laughter from the host. But beneath the levity lies a profound empathy for that girl who pushed too hard, overcommitting until the breakdown loomed like a gathering storm. In the Korean entertainment world, where child actors often debut before they can tie their own shoelaces, such tales aren't anomalies, but threads in a larger tapestry of quiet endurance. Think of the long hours on set, the scripted lives that leave little room for unfiltered friendships, the pressure to perform maturity while hormones rage unchecked. It's a recipe for the very isolation Yojung endured, one that echoes in the stories of peers who've spoken out about similar shadows. Yet, in unpacking this, there's a silver thread of growth weaving through the pain, a testament to how early exposure to complex narratives can forge a premature wisdom, even as it tests the spirit's limits. Post-Angry Mom, with its pulse-pounding mix of high school intrigue and maternal fury that captivated audiences for its unflinching look at bullying scars, Yojung began to carve space for lighter breaths amid the heaviness. She ventured into Love in the Moonlight in 2016, slipping into the guise of a cross-dressing scholar in a Joseon romance that blended comedy and courtly drama, her chemistry with Park Bo-gum sparking a wave of nation's first love fervor all over again. Here, the roles allowed a playfulness that healed some wounds, her character's clever disguises a metaphor for the masks she'd worn off screen. Reflecting on it, she feels a warm surge of pride mingled with relief. Finally, a chance to laugh through the lines, to let joy seep into the portrayal without the weight of inherited demons. But the industry's underbelly lingers in memory. Korean child stars, thrust into a hyper-competitive arena where success is measured in ratings and endorsements, often navigate mental health minefields with scant support. The relentless pursuit of perfection, from diet regimens starting in tween years to the stigma around therapy in a culture prizing stoicism, amplifies those adolescent pitfalls, turning personal growth into a solitary battle. As she emerged from that month-long cocoon, questions answered not by epiphany but by incremental steps, Yojung channeled her intensity into bolder choices, like the enigmatic assassin in Backstreet Rookie years later, a rom-com that let her flex comedic timing while hinting at deeper reserves of strength. It's in these evolutions that her story resonates most profoundly. A reminder that the toll of child stardom isn't just in the lost playdates or the scripted adolescence, but in how it accelerates the soul's maturation, forcing confrontations with identity when others are still trading stickers and secrets. Jung Jae-hyung's nest-leaving analogy lands with fresh power here, evoking images of wide-eyed birds testing fledgling wings against gales, and Yojung affirms it with a quiet conviction. This chaos was her forge, hammering out a self-reliance that's now her quiet superpower. She speaks of the irony with a self-deprecating charm, how at an age when most are obsessing over crushes or college apps, she was dissecting her core being, influenced by scripts that delved into human frailty far beyond her years. There's a bittersweet fondness in her tone, a recognition that while the path scarred, it also illuminated, granting her an empathy that shines through in every role since. From the ethereal demon consort in My Demon to the resilient leads that followed. Diving deeper into those formative projects reveals layers of unintended therapy. In Circle of Atonement, directed by veteran Lee Sung-joon, her character's facade of cheer masking inherited atonement spoke volumes about her own veiled struggles. The film's noirish tone, a canvas for exploring guilt's quiet erosion. Filming wrapped amid the humid summers of 2015, a time when she balanced it with Angry Mom's frenetic pace, the dual demands leaving her emotionally threadbare yet artistically alive. She recalls the camaraderie with Kim Hee-sun, whose veteran poise modeled a grace under pressure that Yojung internalized like a lifeline, feeling a surge of sisterly warmth amid the scripted tears. These experiences, heavy with trauma's echoes, schoolyard betrayals in one, blood-soaked legacies in the other, drew her in because they promised transformation, a naive belief that playing the broken would mend her own cracks. Now, with the distance of years, she views it through a lens of compassionate hindsight, acknowledging how seniors' tales of assimilation weren't hyperbole but harbingers, their words a gentle caution she heeded too late. The physical toll lingers in memory, the way a scene's intensity would knot her stomach long after cut, blurring the exit from character back to self, a disorientation that fed straight into her room-bound retreat. In the broader canvas of Korean showbiz, where child actors like her pave the way for global sensations, such immersions highlight a systemic blind spot: the rush to maturity without the scaffolding of mental health resources. Reports from industry insiders paint a picture of young talents juggling 18-hour days, their emotional literacy stunted by the very demands that propel them forward, leading to breakdowns that make headlines only when they shatter. Yojung's candor in this interview bridges that gap, humanizing the glamour with tales of lights-out introspection, her isolation a stark counterpoint to the roaring applause of 40% ratings. It's a narrative that stirs a protective instinct, a wish that someone had pulled her aside mid-crisis, offering not praise, but presence. Yet her humor punctuates the heaviness, that quip about eternal youth drawing chuckles that lighten the load, revealing a spirit unbroken, if bent. As she traces the arc from parental puppeteering to self-steered sails, there's an undercurrent of empowerment, a reflection on how those pivotal transitions, risky as they were, birthed the artist who now chooses roles with intentional depth. The conversation meanders into the host's own regrets, his early 20s a mirror of delayed reckonings, and in that mutuality, a quiet healing unfolds, proof that sharing the scars normalizes the storm. For Yojung, the fallout of overcommitment was a mental unraveling, her ambition a fierce flame that nearly consumed her, amplified by an environment where vulnerability was a luxury few could afford. She speaks of susceptibility with a philosophical shrug, how at that tender juncture, every critique, every demanding director's note, echoed louder in her echoing doubts. It's a sentiment that evokes a deep, empathetic pang, the kind that makes you root for her not just as a star, but as the girl who deserved more unscripted summers. Transitioning to adulthood, she found solace in projects like 20th Century Girl, a nostalgic coming-of-age film that let her revisit youth on her terms. Her portrayal of a time capsule teen infused with the authenticity born of lived trials. Reflecting on it, she feels a soft glow of vindication. Finally, a role that honored the messiness without demanding she dissolve into it. This dialogue, rich with unguarded moments, underscores a truth as old as fame itself. Adoration's glare can deepen adolescent isolation, turning private lows into silent screams against career highs. Yojung's journey from those high-rated leads, dramas that glued families to screens, fostering a collective raising of her as their own, contrasts sharply with the solitude of her growth spurts, a dissonance that now fuels her advocacy through subtle shares like this. The need for support in those identity-forging years rings clear, a call echoed in the industry's slow pivot toward wellness initiatives, from on-set counselors to mandatory breaks for minors. Her story, laced with the thrill of chasing synopses that sparked her soul, like Moon's fateful pull, reveals how early choices ripple outward, shaping not just resumes, but resilient hearts. In the end, it's her openness that captivates most, a beacon for young talents weaving through fame's labyrinth, reminding them that questioning the self isn't weakness, but the first brave step toward wholeness. As the video fades, you're left with a lingering warmth, grateful for the woman who emerged from the dark room not just intact, but illuminated, her reflections a gift that invites us all to examine our own hidden nests. Yet, to truly grasp the depth of her evolution, consider the mosaic of roles that followed, each a brushstroke adding color to her palette of experiences. In Golden Cross, shortly after her teen upheavals, she tackled a vengeful heiress in a thriller laced with corporate intrigue, the character's steely resolve a far cry from her earlier ingenue charm, demanding a vocal shift that strained her throat for weeks. She remembers the physical echo of that effort, a hoarse whisper post-filming that mirrored her inner rasp, but also the exhilaration of stretching boundaries, feeling for the first time like the architect of her own narrative arc. That sense of agency, hard-won from those self-guided decisions post-elementary, became her compass, guiding her to Secret Door, a saguk where she embodied a scholarly consort amid political tempests, her poise under palace pressures a nod to the real-life poise she'd cultivated in Crisis. Reflecting on these, there's a quiet awe in her voice, a recognition of how trauma-themed immersions, while perilous, planted seeds of empathy that bloom in subtler works today. The Korean entertainment landscape, with its fusion of tradition and tenacity, amplifies these personal odysseys. Child actors here aren't just performers, but cultural touchstones, their growth chronicled in real time by adoring publics. Yojung's trajectory, from the wide-eyed protagonist in Beethoven Virus, where her violin prodigy tugged at heartstrings with melodies of loss, to the multifaceted lovers in modern romances, mirrors a nation's fascination with reinvention. But it's the unspoken toll that lingers, the way high expectations forge premature maturity, leaving philosophical voids where playground philosophies should suffice. In her interview, this crystallizes during a shared laugh over delayed crises, the host's warning of midlife reckonings, a sobering toast to proactive unraveling. She absorbs it with a thoughtful pause, her reflection carrying a gentle admonition to her younger self. Lean into the questions sooner. Let allies in before the door clicks shut. That month in darkness wasn't defeat, but gestation. A chrysalis phase where "who am I" evolved into "I am enough," emerging to fuel ambitions that now balance depth with delight. Expanding on Angry Mom's legacy, the drama's blend of maternal rage and youthful defiance resonated because it peeled back bullying's banal horrors. Aron's arc from victim to voice, a catharsis Yojung channeled from her own veiled battles. Co-starring Ji Hyun-woo as the earnest prosecutor added layers of moral complexity. Their on-screen tensions, a safe harbor for her to vent the pressures of perfectionism. Post-rap, she felt a cathartic release, like shedding a too-tight skin, mingled with a lingering tenderness for the character whose pain she'd worn so closely. Similarly, Circle of Atonement's exploration of familial sins through her lens of youthful denial offered a mirror to her identity quests. The film's Cannes premiere, a surreal validation that her risks paid emotional dividends. These weren't mere jobs. They were dialogues with her developing self. Each line delivered a step toward integration. Now, in hindsight, she marvels at the innocence of that pursuit, how she dismissed immersion's risks as professional right, only to learn through lived blur that boundaries are sacred, even in art's embrace. The industry's evolving gaze on mental health, spurred by tragedies like those of beloved idols who've spoken out or stepped away, underscores the timeliness of her tale. Initiatives like the Korean Actors Guild's youth wellness programs, emphasizing therapy access and schedule caps, hint at change. But for pioneers like Yojung, who blazed trails without such nets, the scars inform rather than define. Her candor fosters a ripple of empathy, inviting viewers to see beyond the glamour to the girl commuting between sets and studies. Her limited SNS exposure, a double blessing that spared cyberstorms but starved peer connections. In that void, work became both refuge and riddle, its demands a philosophical forge where self-reliance was hammered out amid the din. Jung's animal kingdom analogies ground it universally. Every creature's departure from safety is fraught, But hers, under public scrutiny, carried amplified stakes, a reflection that evokes a profound respect for her uncomplaining grace. As the narrative arcs toward her present, projects like My Demon showcase a matured command, her demon bride a whirlwind of wit and wistfulness that draws on those early depths without drowning in them. Paired with Song Kang's brooding intensity, the fantasy romance explores possession and partnership, themes that echo her own journey from lost to located. She reflects on this phase with buoyant optimism, a feeling of homecoming in roles that honor her multifaceted self. The irony of deep dives at youth, now a fond anecdote rather than a wound. The interview's close, with its emphasis on support's necessity, leaves a hopeful afterglow. Public love, when tempered with understanding, can bridge isolation's chasms, turning solo struggles into shared strength. Yojung's story, from 4-year-old sprite to introspective icon, isn't just memoir, it's manifesto, urging the industry to nurture the nest leavers with arms wide open. In her words, we glimpse the human pulse behind the starlight, a reminder that even in fame's fierce forge, tenderness endures, and questions, once voiced, light the way forward.